Hello everyone, my name is Mike, welcome back to the YouTube channel. Today we're continuing having a look at another Sabaton song, and this time 7 Pillars of Wisdom. Hope you enjoy. So Sabaton's 7 Pillars of Wisdom. So given the desert and the title 7 Pillars of Wisdom, I already know that this is about Thomas Lawrence, otherwise known as Lawrence of Arabia. Now I don't want to go into too detail yet, as I usually do. I just rather watch the video. I've got the lyrics on as well, and as always I'll try and pause the video and kind of fill in little bits of information where I can. But Lawrence of Arabia, just quickly, he's an outstanding kind of individual. He's almost like a modern day Indiana Jones type thing. He was everything from, you know, a spy, an archaeologist, a soldier, a kind of strategist, you know, just a linguist, a writer. The list goes on. You know, a bit of a mad lad, to coin the phrase. But obviously I don't want to say too much because I don't know what the song is going to say. But lyrics are on. Let's just get straight into it and see what this is about. Oh, Indy's actually in this. Is he acting? I've learned his name now, by the way.
We're here.
Far from home, a man with a mission. In the heat of the glistening sun, in the heart of ancient tradition, this man's journey has only begun. Lead the charge, a raider has entered the battlefield. Sabotage, the game is about to unfold. As the darkness falls and Arabia calls, on his breast his wings, as the battle begins, may the land lay claim unto Lawrence name. 7 pillars of wisdom lights the flame. Our goals to gain independence, hide and seek hunters hot to the trail. Join the ranks, obtain their acceptance, side by side raid the ultimate rail. Lead the charge, speed up Medina, Damascus calls. Sabotage, demolish the bridges to dust. As the darkness falls and Arabia calls, on his breast his wings, as the battle begins, may the land lay claim unto Lawrence name. 7 pillars of wisdom lights the flame.
So just pausing that there, I just realised I actually went through the first and second verse there, I think, because I usually pause after the first verse and chorus and talk a little bit and then pause and stuff. But I was kind of just swept away with the music videos and stuff like that. Of which, speaking of the music video, are these lads not absolutely melting? That intro scene, they were wearing black. Joachim was wearing metal in the desert. I mean, maybe it's just because it's been absolutely roasting here in England, but bugger that. That sounds awful to be in black in the desert. But yeah, so I'm just going to talk briefly because I've missed the first and second verse. So Thomas Lawrence, or Lawrence of Arabia as is known, kind of known for the Arab Revolt, which is what this song says. When the Arab Revolt was there, it was essentially in Ottoman territory. There was Sharif Hussein, who's kind of an Arab leader, and he basically approached the British and he said that he would offer to have an Arab revolt behind enemy lines, basically wreak havoc on the Ottomans, and in return the British would help him set up an independent Arab state. The British, with the stalemate in Western Europe and Gallipoli kind of being what Gallipoli was, the offer for kind of basically another front to open up, even if it was just a minor distraction, which there's some evidence to suggest the British thought that the revolt would be absolutely crushed, but at least for a small amount of time they might be able to cause some issue or some distraction to the Turks, accepted, and kind of swept the whole idea of the Arab independent state kind of under the rug, due to reasons that this song might actually include later, which I'm just going to hold on to. But as for Lawrence himself, as I already said, incredibly interesting individual. He was born a bastard, technically, out of wedlock, but he absolutely adored history. He went to go study at Oxford. He went on a walking holiday for several months in Syria, and when he graduated from university, he went to work in Syria for the British Museum as an archaeologist, and that's where he kind of began to kind of embrace Arabic culture to an extent. He learned how to read and write in Arabic. And eventually this kind of, the geopolitical kind of events of the world as it was happening, led to Lawrence kind of being on the radar of the British, and particularly British intelligence, in order to use him as his kind of archaeological front in gathering intelligence and mapping various different regions of the kind of area in order to help with British military intelligence for what the Ottomans may well do, particularly in relation to the Suez Canal. And so when Faisal, the son of Sharif Hussein, kind of launched this initial revolt, it had some minor successes and was kind of looking promising. And then the Arabs suffered at the hands of Ottoman artillery and aircraft, both of which the kind of rebels had nothing that they could really do against. The rebels weren't really a modern fighting force. They were more, kind of nomadic warriors, hit and run tactics, that type of thing. And they weren't really equipped to fight artillery or aircraft. They had no real provisions to fighting that. But it was in the combination of Lawrence aiding Faisal as that kind of liaison that supplied the rebels with the kind of supplies and the weapons that they needed to fight the Ottomans. They still couldn't do much about aircraft and stuff like that, but they could help. And this proves actually quite annoying to Lawrence, that in giving the Arab rebels kind of these weapons and supplies, they still wouldn't follow orders, and they wouldn't kind of fight as a cohesive unit. They wouldn't kind of fight along the line, or in that kind of sense either. What they would do is they would fight rather foolhardily and individualistically, and this meant that Lawrence kind of had to rethink how to use them. And in conjunction with Faisal, they come up with the idea of turning these warriors, these Arab rebels, into basically almost like flying columns, hit and run tactics. And as this song said, when it kind of damaging the rail, it alluded to. And that's kind of what they could do, is because they could not outmatch the Ottomans fighting as a conventional force. And so that meant that they carried out small raids, small skirmishes. So they'd hit patrols, they'd hit weakly defended garrisons, they'd hit kind of supply convoys and stuff like this. And their kind of shining light, if anything like that, was their attempts to sever the artery between Medina and Damascus, the two cities. And that was the Hejaz Railway, which was kind of the artery between the two of them. But what would be quite intelligent as well is they would never completely destroy the railway. They would just damage it to the point where it couldn't run a train. Particularly as well, they also detonated charges and stuff like that, and destroyed trains in some places. But the reason why they kind of never destroyed the railway entirely or things like this is because it would create logistical problems there, just disruption, but also it would force the Ottomans into repairing the railway time and time again, and also it would force the Ottomans into kind of investing considerable resources to the ongoing defence of the railway line, resources that they could have put elsewhere. But yeah, so that's what I want to do. I don't want to go too much again, as I said, because I don't know what these last kind of verse or two verses, because we're about halfway through the video. So we'll see where it takes us before I go even further.
After the war has been won, deception or treason, who can tell? Who's good to gain, who's good to lose? Who did the dying? Betrayal or trust from within? Or compel? The pillars of wisdom can tell. Back home where a new life awaits. Whispers of past, the sands of Arabia calling.
Okay, so sorry to interrupt the kind of guitar solo, but yeah, so when it talks about at home kind of deception or betrayal or treason and things like this, that's in reference to the Sykes-Picot agreement, which, remember what I said about the Arabs wanted that free kind of independent Arab state. They agreed to that, the British, but it didn't come to fruition. And this Sykes-Picot agreement was essentially the lines of division, which, you know, when you get criticised for drawing lines on a map, and that's essentially what Britain and France done to the whole kind of that general region. A line was drawn in between spheres of influence between the British and the French, and leaving no real room for the Arab Free State. And indeed, you know, this was kept from the Arabs, obviously. You know, this was drawn up in 1916, so, you know, they knew about this. Lawrence knew about this himself, but he didn't actually agree with it. And in truth, there's an argument to be made that it was Lawrence's drive towards the north in gaining the Arabs' victories at like Aqaba and trying to get to Damascus first and stuff like that, in the hope that perhaps if you could get the Arabs to take this, then they would be forced to be included at the negotiation table and have some sort of leeway or leverage in kind of getting that free state to them. And indeed, when the Bolsheviks actually took over in Russia in 1917, they actually leaked or released the Sykes-Picot agreement, which must have been a bit awkward to suggest. But yeah, I said, and you know, as they said, betrayal. Lawrence knew about this, but obviously his duty was to Britain, was to king and country. However, that didn't mean he didn't like it or he didn't, you know, agree with it. You know, he even after the war as well, he was an ardent critic of what had happened. And in his memoirs and things like that, he said that he was ashamed of his role and stuff like that in kind of having the Arabs trust him and trust his word, and through his word they trusted the British government and their deeds, and that they would allow them to basically form that state. And obviously it didn't, and this would be the final nail in the coffin would be in 1920. So when Damascus fell, it was the General Allenby who was the leader of the Egyptian Expeditionary Force, because Lawrence of Arabia didn't actually reach Damascus first. However, for political reasons, they were shown to be, similar to the way the France were the first ones in Paris. But General Allenby gave permission for Faisal Hussein, as I said, the leader of the Arab revolt, to basically form a provisional government of sorts within Syria. And it kind of existed, and the hopes from Faisal and stuff like this would be that in having this kind of provisional kingdom, that the Americans or the British would kind of support the Arabs against French interests, because the French, practically throughout the entire war, were very nervous and suspicious of basically how well the Arab revolt was doing, because they saw that region as what should belong to France and under French control. And so Faisal was hoping that the Americans or the British would support him should the French ever try and do anything, and they didn't. And in 1920, there'd been some various raids around the area from various different Arabs in the region who, post-war, still wanted that independence. They didn't want to be controlled by France. And there was a series of small skirmishes and raids and things like this. And it just basically gave the French more and more leverage at the League of Nations and on the kind of political scale. And eventually, the French were given a mandate over Syria. And an ultimatum was given to the Arab government under Faisal that the Arab forces should disband their armies and kind of cease all his hostilities. Otherwise, basically, you know, they'd be destroyed. And Faisal accepted this. He accepted this ultimatum. But Faisal's own defense minister, Yusuf al-Hamza, refused to agree to this ultimatum, and he marched to meet the French advance. And you know, he had a ragtag kind of ill-equipped army, and he went into it fully knowing that he was going to lose. But his whole idea of it was that he wanted to send a message that an independent Arab state wouldn't surrender without a fight. In the resulting kind of battle, the Arabs got absolutely ruined by the modern French army, and that kind of crushed and was an end to, you know, the dream, I suppose, of both the Arabs and Lawrence of an independent free state in Arabia. And that's kind of where the story ends. I just wonder where this song will lead to now. So it's said to be continued there. Is there like a follow-up to this? If somebody can know, if they can put that in the description below. But as I said, that I told the story that I knew, or the knowledge that I knew of Lawrence of Arabia. You know, he's an incredibly interesting individual, and I may well check out the Sabaton history of this video as well and react to that, partly because not necessarily for the history part, which is strange for me to say, because I have quite a good understanding of Lawrence of Arabia. However, the part that I'm interested in watching that video is when they explain the song and the making of that song, because I want to see like them in the desert, and if there's any stories on what they did there and anything like that in the construction of that song. Because as well, as I said, you know, it's customary for now that I comment on the actual music tastes of the video, and I actually quite liked Seven Pillars of Wisdom. I liked the kind of song, the fluid motion of it. Still not my favorite. I still think my favorite is probably still Uprising, but no, this one was good. But yeah, so that's been Sabaton, Seven Pillars of Wisdom, the story of Lawrence of Arabia. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you've learned things. Hopefully I've helped you learn things. And come along with me as we check out the Sabaton history video in the future. Thank you ever so much for watching. Bye-bye.